We'll be starting in just a few moments. Hang tight. I see more connecting. This is wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and say, good afternoon, everyone. We're so happy that you're here. Welcome to the nonprofit sector call that we have every other Thursday. It's a wonderful time to come together and share inspirational moments like this that's going to happen today. My name is Dana Boldazar, and I am with United Way of Southern Nevada, obviously, and I am the individual giving manager for Women United. So I have my email in the chat if you ever have any questions. We're all here for you, as you know. So we're glad to be a part of this special edition of the NPO call today, and you will hear more about the panelists shortly. So as you all know, we have closed caption that is also enabled, and we are recording this meeting. So if I may, I'd love to share just a little bit of background as to how this came about. About a month and a half ago, we were emailed by PNC Bank, Danette Sedeth, and she is a board member also with us for many years. Very proud to be working with her and a part of this opportunity. She wanted to pull together an opportunity for us to recognize accelerating women's financial equity in the work environment. And immediately, Janet and I were extremely excited. We gathered the team. We started collaborating around what could we do? Should it be with Women United? Should it be part of the NPO call? The NPO call was the perfect solution for this. So a lot of dates of getting together and organizing and just finding the perfect panelists for this opportunity. Today is going to be very valuable in many people's lives, and I'm just very excited to get this started and get going with the panelist questions and moving forward. So if I may, before we get started, we love to do our photo. So if everyone can show us your beautiful faces, our marketing team will take a photo.
Thank you, everyone, for turning on your cameras. See, give everyone a couple more minutes or seconds. All right, perfect. Yay, we have a full screen of beautiful faces. So I will do one really quickly. So ready? 3, 2, 1. And then let me just get one more of the second page so we don't miss anyone. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Welcome anyone who just joined us. We're getting ready to get started here. And I would love to introduce to our monitor today, our mediator, Deputy Director of Workforce Connections and United Way board member, Irene Bustamante Adams. Welcome, Irene.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be the best hour that you're going to spend today investing your time. We have a dynamic group of individuals lined up for you. Wanted to wish everybody here in Southern Nevada that's paying attention, happy Hispanic Heritage Month. One of the things that I'm so grateful about living here in Southern Nevada is the rich diversity. And so I love the contribution that everyone makes to our community to make it better. And this time we get to showcase some contributions from the Hispanic community. So thank you. We are going to have a poll later this by Zoom. So make sure to be ready, be paying attention, because then we know who's paying attention and who isn't. In addition, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel now. And I keep looking at Janet because we rehearsed this, but you know how days go by and then you lose track. But I'm going to start with PNC Bank. Dana mentioned it earlier, the dynamic leadership at that organization. And she has been a great mentor to me. She probably doesn't know she's a mentor, but it is the support that I have received from this individual. So Danette, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Irene. And I share as much respect for you and all that you've done here in our community, and love having the privilege of serving on the board with you. So first, before I introduce myself, I want to thank all of you here for joining us today. Especially thank you to the nonprofit staff and leaders who meet the needs of our community every day. I've been a United Way volunteer and leadership giver since 1984. I'm very proud to say that I've worked on so many different committees under various different leaderships of the organization. The majority of my time is spent in education endeavors. I worked with Dolores Hauk many years ago on an early childhood longitudinal initiative that we did. So I'm passionate about this work, greatly appreciate everything that everybody does here. As was mentioned, I'm with PNC Bank. I've been in the financial services industry in Las Vegas for the majority of my career, serve as a board member, past chairman, currently chair of the finance committee for United Way, and very excited to be here with all of you today. So thank you very much. My title is Regional President and Head of Commercial Banking. That's the role that I have with PNC. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Danette. And we are going to ask our first question, right, Miss Jasmine? Do you guys see that poll up on the screen? We'll give you 30 seconds to answer. Just pick. I don't know if Miss Jasmine, you'll have to notify me when, oh, because I haven't filled mine. I was like, wait, I'm waiting for
We want your feedback too, Irene.
yes, I forgot to include myself. And Miss Danette will give the answers in her remarks when we start off. We're gonna go next to Bill. Can you please introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Thank you so much, Irene. I appreciate the chance to be here today, and thank you so much to United Way and PNC for providing the opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas on workforce here in Southern Nevada. And I just look forward to the conversation. I'm Bill Regenhard. I'm the Director of Workforce Development for the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, LVGEA, and we are the Regional Economic Development Authority here for Nevada in the Southern region. So we do our best to help diversify our economy, and workforce is one of the first two questions that an incoming business will ask about when they're looking at Nevada to place their business. So just glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, Jasmine, we don't have any questions for Bill, right? It was just for Miss Danette.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then our third speaker, Patrick, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the group.
Yes, of course. So good afternoon, everyone. Great to see so many people on here and so many familiar faces. and really humbling to be alongside of Bill and Danette here. Just had the opportunity to have lunch with Magda and Danette. I want to say it was last week. Was that just last week? It feels like longer. That's what kind of week it's been here. So I'm Patrick Callahan. I'm the CEO of Tech Impact. We are a nonprofit organization, and our theory of change is really focused in two distinct areas. The first is around capacity building, where we help nonprofits leverage technology for good. And the second is around workforce development, where most of our workforce development programs are also oriented toward technology, and particularly underrepresented communities and connecting them to employment. So fantastic to be here with all of you, and I look forward to sharing some thoughts and ideas and hearing your thoughts and ideas as well.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Now we're going to show you some of at least the first answer, Danette, because I'm going to have you jump in and share about the response. So Stephen, Diane, Tabitha, Krista, let's see. We don't have it associated to the person. It's just a group. So don't be afraid. This is not a fail or pass. But Jasmine, if you could show us the results for question number 1. And then Danette can give the right answer. So
Great.
Danette, there you see that 38% of us think that women will achieve pay equity in 148 years. Is that accurate?
No, sadly, according to the World Economic Forum, it will take 257 years for women to close the pay equity gap. Yesterday was the 257th day of the calendar year. And so that's why we're so excited to be doing this today to help create an awareness of how long, based on our current rate, it would actually take us to close the pay equity gap. It will take us 257 years, according to the World Economic Forum. So thanks, Irene.
Bravo. And it was interesting that 35% of us responded that it would be 44 years. That's like aggressive, right?
That's actually the number for Nevada. In Nevada, Irene, so the number, the 257 is globally, but for Nevada, it is just over 43 years, which is still probably not in my lifetime and not acceptable.
Gosh, that's conversation at the dinner table, right, Kimberly? So let's go to that second question though, Miss Jasmine, you brought it up. We'll stay with Danette. What is one of the drivers of the economic gender gap? And if you scroll down, Ms. Danette, 76% of us think it's pay disparity. Is that accurate?
They are all accurate. So underrepresentation in the workforce is a big contributor. Only 55% of women participate compared to 78% of men. And so that is certainly a big factor. And then, as we know, there's definitely pay disparities, unpaid domestic work and unequal access to credit all play into that 257 pay gap. One of the statistics I have on the unequal access to credit is that there are still 72 countries where women do not have the right to open a bank account or obtain credit. Being here in America, we all take that for granted, but it isn't true around the world. So that's a big contributing force.
Right. Great conversation, right, Juan and Megan at the dinner table for this evening. And then the last question, Ms. Danette, what percentage of U.S. wealth is controlled by women? 51% think that 35% of us think, no, 50% of us think that 35% of the U.S. wealth is controlled by women. What is
right? The answer is 51%. More than half of the wealth in the United States is actually controlled by women. So we have major decision-making roles in our professional responsibilities, our jobs, our households as wives, mothers, daughters, sisters. All of those roles play an important part of our wealth drivers. And so we should have a seat at the table.
Wow, Gina, Krista, that's an amazing statistic that would be shareable to the young people that you guys surround yourself with. So good stuff. Thank you, Ms. Danette. We're going to go to Bill and Patrick. We're going to be inclusive here, but this is a question for you also, Ms. Danette. For you, Bill, you talked about that the LVGEA focuses on attracting businesses to this region, also expanding. But in your interactions with the companies, what do you see currently as workplace gaps that employers are trying to address?
I think one of the, thanks for the question, Irene. I think one of the biggest obstacles that we have to overcome, that challenge is really the skills gap and the perception of what that skills gap is or what those gaps are. When we talk about skills gaps, they're basically the skills that an employee has and the gap between the skills that they need to perform their job. So depending on the industry sector, those gaps can be wide or they can be narrow. But it's really interesting to see that not only do employers look for ways to address those skills gaps, but they look for ways to bring in other partners to help in the process. So in my role at LVGEA, my job is to basically collaborate, facilitate, and advocate for the workforce system here in Southern Nevada. One of the ways that we look at solving the skills gap issue is through that collaboration. And collaboration means getting into groups like this where you have that conversation about what the needs actually are. When we look at the workforce blueprint that just came out for 2022, we saw that software developers became #1 and #2 most in-demand jobs, and Patrick can probably address that as well. But those two positions or those two occupations actually rose. They were down in the hundreds, and now they're #1 and #2. So technology, that skills gap in technology is a really big issue. And when we're looking at some of the other issues along those same lines, we also have to notice that there's a skills gap in those middle level manager positions. So we have 91% of talent acquisition professionals say that the soft skills necessary to perform those management positions are lacking. 3 out of 4 employers will say that the skills gaps are lacking in college graduates. So that's something that we really have to address as professionals in our own respective industries, so we can help upskill, train up those individuals that we are mentoring and coaching within our own industry. So those skills gaps start to decrease. So, in my position, I do my best to collaborate with the industry sectors, the 7 sectors that the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy put out by the LVGEA state, and then bring those groups together: higher ed, workforce professionals, industry, all the partnerships that we've developed through really these last couple of years. I've been here all my life, I've never seen it so collaborative as it is today. So you have people that are wanting to be part of the solution. And then facilitating those conversations is another key aspect of my position, to where I can start that conversation and figure out which direction we want to go. And then advocating for the system in general. It's really important to get people involved. So many times we'll have lot of the industry partners get together and start talking about workforce, start talking about the skills gap, start talking about the wage disparities, but nobody is raising their hand to say, yeah, I'll take point on this, or I want to participate in a focus group that's going to get things done. So we not only have to start the conversation, but we have to move it forward to take collective action so those solutions can be put into play.
Thank you, Bill. And you mentioned the workforce blueprint. Can you put that in the chat for everyone? I'm not sure if everybody understands what that is,
Sure.
but as a region, we identified the emerging industries that are coming into Southern Nevada. So if you would say, gosh, I wish I knew where the puck was headed. This is how you're going to know where the puck is headed and what the workforce demand would be for the people that you work with or the people that you serve. So put that in the chat, Bill. And Patrick, we're going to go to you because one of those 7 emerging industries is technology. And I think that's the realm that you're in. Can you talk about the workplace gaps that you see within IT? Because Bill talked about software developers. And what is the one thing that the industry is doing to tackle that?
Yeah, great question. And I thank you, Bill. I think you set that up perfectly. And I think it highlights too what an important role the LBGEA plays in our community, right? Which is, as you put it, Irene, where's the puck going, right? And if we know where the puck is going, we can skate there, right? I think someone famous said that once. So and I think that's important, right? Because what I'm seeing is a changing economy in Southern Nevada, right? So automation is starting to take hold. You look at things like hospitality, which has been the leader in our community for a long, long time. But many of those jobs, are being automated and they're being downsized. And so you have to say, well, is it skills gap that the employers have, or is it the skills gap that the employees have? And really the answer to that is there's both, right? And not only do employers have gaps in skills that they need to fill, but the workforce has gaps that they need to fill so that we meet the demands of a growing economy and a shifting economy in Southern Nevada, which I think is really important to recognize. I think, one of the things that strikes me almost immediately is underrepresentation, right? And when we talk about underrepresentation, in technology, what we're saying is who holds most of these jobs and who's likely to hold most of these jobs? And the answer to that are mostly white men, right? And so one of the areas that we focus on quite a bit is working with underrepresented communities to train folks for those jobs. And so I'm talking about women and I'm talking about minorities, right? And in our programs, that's where we really put our focus. It's not to say it's exclusive, but it's more than inclusive. It's a focus of our work. And I think it's a gap in our employers' workforce, right? When you don't have diversity of your workforce, then you're missing a big opportunity, right? I know this because in our own organization, we have a lot of diversity, and that means we get a lot of different thoughts and we get different ideas that we might not otherwise get if we all look and act the same, right? So it's incredibly important to recognize, the softer skills that Bill was talking about, I think is incredibly important. We hear this consistently from employers that folks come out of college and are not really ready to work. They're getting a great education, but what they're not getting is acclimation to a work environment. How do you dress? How do you talk to your manager? Why is it important to show up on time, right? Like all of these things that maybe we take for granted because we've been in the workforce, but they're not all necessarily intuitive to our workforce. So we hear that quite frequently. We try very hard to build that into our programs as well. A lot of professional skills, a lot of soft skills. They seem to be, from everything I hear from employers, they're valued just as highly as the technical skills are. Certainly, technology isn't going anywhere. There's almost nothing within your offices that doesn't end in a piece of technology, whether it's your accounting system, your procurement system, your communication systems, everything. So technology is not going away. It's getting more and more relevant. And I think the pandemic only put the spotlight on that, right? We all had to, pivot very quickly to work from alternative environments, to be able to communicate more effectively without being in the same room together. And there's a lot of tools that, kind of have been developed. And that's what happens, right? As the needs develop, the tools develop. So we're going to need more software engineers. There's no doubt about it. And when you have, when you're building software and you're providing that to organizations, then you're going to need more support people for that. And then I think a third and fourth area is security. You don't have to go very far, right? Open the paper, the review, and you'll see articles about companies that, have lost a considerable amount of money or trust, for that matter, which is worse than money probably, because they were infiltrated through a cybersecurity action of some sort. So it's incredibly important that we train more people to help fortify our organizations. Believe me, the bad guys are always, one step ahead. They're always looking for the loophole. So we have to have more and more talent in that area. Then I think an area that's just going to, grab all of us is data, right? We're talking about big data here, and almost, I can tell you our board of directors and other boards that I sit on, they want to see data, right? They want data informed decisions. And so we need more and more practitioners in the data area that know not only how to get data, where to store it, but how to use big data to bring in different pieces and disparate data to tell a story, right? Because that's really what data is most effective for, is to tell a story, whether it's we need more resources, or we accomplished more of our mission, or we need more money, whatever those stories are. But that's really what data is all about. So we need more and more practitioners that not only understand the systems behind data, but understand how to visualize the data so that it makes it easier to absorb for non-technical people, right? Like myself. So I think those are the gaps that I'm seeing, right? I'm seeing gaps certainly in technology resources, but most importantly, in underrepresented technology resources.
And Irene, if I could piggyback on that too. I mean, Patrick put it very eloquently. But when you're looking at that question of whether or not the gaps are on the employee side or the employer side, you just look at the employer side for a second and realize that whether you're a business owner or a manager, HR professional, you should be doing a regular gap analysis in your business to, number one, identify those key skills that are needed, or if we're talking about wages, the key wages that are needed, and what kind of disparity there are in that realm, and then measure those against a baseline or a goal that you have set, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So it's really important to do that, and then third, really come up with a plan to solve the challenge, right? So we want to be very solution focused, like the collaborative efforts that we're doing now here in Southern Nevada. We're really striving to be solution focused rather than just continuing to kick the can down the road.
Thank you, Bill. Danette, we're going to come back to you because before we move on to our next question, one of the emerging industries that we talked about was IT technology. That's what is in that workforce blueprint. But the second is finance and professional business. So that's the space that you play in. So can you share what current workplace gaps that you see within that industry for Southern Nevada?
Sure. One of the studies that's often cited is the McKinsey study that is done in conjunction with the Lean In organization. And one finding that they continue to have year over year is the broken rung problem, which is where men are promoted at a much higher rate than women. And so we continue to see that, and it goes up and gets worse and worse. By the time you get to the CEO suite, it's a 75% gap. So one way that PNC is assuring that we're supporting all of our early career professionals is we have a program called Forward, and it stands for Women's Advancement, Recognition, and Development. And one of the expressions that I often use, and those of you who've met with me recently probably heard me say it, is equality does not equal equity. We have to appreciate that if we want people to end up at the same place, some people start at a different place, and really treat people individually and understand what they need on an individual basis. And so one way that we're also addressing that is we have a program that we've recently announced, a 3-year commitment to an organization formerly known as SheEO, but it's called Coralus. Now they've rebranded to include non-binary individuals. And we've made a $1.257 million commitment. You get the 257 in there, right? And they're for women-owned non-binary businesses so that they can receive 0% interest loans. And hopefully in those industries and those people who are able to successfully access credit, they can increase their workforce. And as you've heard from both Bill and Patrick, it's important to understand that that diversity is important. And everybody on this call has the opportunity to look at their own individual workforces and see where we can create more opportunities for that, both the pay gap to be closed as well as representation in leadership ranks.
Wow, that is some demonstration, intentional action steps. So kudos to PNC Bank for making that effort. That is phenomenal. I hadn't heard about that. So we're going to go to the audience after the second question so that you could pose your own questions for this phenomenal leaders and experts in their field. One of the questions that I'm going to ask you is, we've talked about 2 emerging industries here in Southern Nevada. There's 5 left. Put in the chat what you think those other 5 are. Bill will be the scorer because he knows them by heart. So be thinking about that. There's 5 other industries where the puck is headed here in Southern Nevada, and they have workforce needs. So Danette, I'm going to come to you for the second question. You also play a very big role in nonprofits. And both in the public and private sector. What can these leaders on this Zoom call do to support these efforts when it comes to workforce gaps or pay equity?
Thank you so much, Irene, for that question. I am a firm believer that if everybody does a little bit within their realm of influence, that collectively we can have a huge impact. One of the things that I've chosen to start focusing on as I've been out speaking more in my new role with PNC is taking control of our narrative. And so, everybody on this call, we have an opportunity to say what we want to be true about Southern Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada broadly as a state, and focus on the areas of excellence that we have and continue to expand on those, creating more visibility and awareness where we're doing things well, and making sure that within our own shops, if you will, that we're being very intentional about our hiring practices. One of the things that I've done for most of my career is I maintain a talent board. And what that means is I stay connected to the people in my industry in all of the different aspects of the financial institutions so that I can have a broader lens to hire from. And I'm very proud to say that we have a diverse team that we've put together in the last year here at PNC. So it's 50-50 male, female. 40% of my staff were not born here in the US. We have diversity of ethnicity as well as gender. And so just with my team so far that I've, built here, I'm having impact, I believe, in the community by maintaining that intentionality around hiring. And so everybody on this call, if you're a leader or a hiring manager, you can do that. You can be very intentional in your applicant pool about how you're identifying potential candidates, and understand that some of them may need more support to begin with in order to catch up with somebody who may have had better grooming. My own personal example I always use for that is I'm a first generation college student. I was at UNLV, and nobody in my family had gone to college. Now the entire generation, my daughter's generation, have all graduated from college, and it was much easier in some ways for them because they knew what that looked like. They had the belief that they could do it, and they could follow guidance and leadership that I provided for them that I didn't have as a first generation college student. My parents didn't know what to expect for my workload and things like that. So just be mindful of where people are at when you're bringing them on board. That would be my other suggestion, to invest in them what they need to be where you want them to be.
Great, thank you for that. Bill, we'll go to you. Can you offer any words of wisdom for the nonprofits or the other entities in this space, especially if they have a limited budget? How can they help with the workforce gaps that exist?
I worked in the nonprofit industry or nonprofit world for a long time, and the biggest strongest advice that I could give is get involved. As a nonprofit, sometimes we get sucked into our own world, and we only network with other nonprofits, or we have these conversations with the people that are already at our table. So plug into things like the industry sector partnerships that we're putting together now. So Irene put me on the spot by telling you that I have those memorized, so I'll just go ahead and give them to you now before I forget.
Well, wait a minute. I want to, Bill, I want to acknowledge Kimberly because she put in, she's on the right path.
Oh, cool. Okay,
She put in nurses, so that falls in the healthcare.
There you go.
She also put in supply chain management, which we know that's the logistics.
Mhm.
So now we have 4 out of 7. What is she missing?
Oh, okay. So healthcare services, you already said. Transportation and logistics is one. General and advanced manufacturing, information and communications technology, business and financial services, clean technology, and one more would be creative technologies. So with all those industry sectors that we have, we're convening those industry decision makers and owners and executives to have discussions that are specific to their industry. And what we're finding is that the same conversation keeps happening. The skills gap, the need for immediate hires, the inability to hire people that are qualified for a specific position or positions, the lack of technology skills. So a lot of those conversations are happening now. And getting back to your original questions of how nonprofits can get involved in that is plug into one of those industry sectors. Doesn't really matter if you're 100% of your nonprofit deals with those, but in some way you have a connection. For instance, 3 Square Food Bank, they rely on trucks coming into them all the time. They rely on volunteers to come in and help, pack food and things like that. So they're in the logistics area, right? That's all logistics and warehousing and supply chain. Get involved in that. Figure out where you can fit in the discussion and plug in. And you'll find that not only do you have an affinity with some of the people in the room, but you may find dollars in there as well. So, you know, it helps if you get involved.
And we're going to share Bill's information a little later, so you'll have it. So thank you, Bill. And so thank you, Kate and Kimberly. You guys were spot on to know where the puck is headed for this region. And a lot of us on the Zoom call are serving clients that are underrepresented in these areas. And so this is a way for you to get involved. So thank you. And Patrick, we'll go to you as far as IT. Right? You said you're not a techie, but you're in that space. So what hope is there for others that may not be a white male to get involved in that industry?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Irene. And let me just reinforce too what Bill said. I think getting engaged is really important. And again, LVGEA is playing an important role in convening the industry sector partners, because workforce ultimately starts with the employer, right? What do we need as employers? How are we meeting those needs? And that ultimately is going to translate into jobs and helping our economy here in Southern Nevada. So I'd also like to reinforce what I think Danette said, which is really leadership, right? Like we have to be the leads here. We have to be the ones setting the example. We have to be hiring a diverse team of folks around us, right? And I think one thing we can really encourage from an employer's side is to take a hard look at requirements. Too often I come across organizations that say, we'd like to be more diverse, but we're having trouble finding people. Oh, by the way, we only hire people with 4-year degrees. Well, I'm going to tell you that like that is a barrier, right? You know, so you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, we're only going to hire people with 4-year degrees and we want diversity, because I'm going to cite all the numbers and everything, but that's just that those two don't equal. So you have to be willing to look at alternative pipelines. And I think that's really important. And so when you talk about developing skills in the skills gap, it comes from different places, right? Certainly 4-year degrees are great and college education is fantastic, but it's not for everyone. And there are really smart people that did not go that route or may not be going that route. And so we need to provide opportunities for them. And that's largely where workforce development steps in to say, okay, you didn't go that route, but we want to provide you other opportunities for education. I mean, this is what, our organization does and other organizations in Southern Nevada. And these are the organizations Bill's convening when we're trying to talk about how to fill those skills gaps. So, I do think being open to alternative pipelines and really giving people a fair shake for job opportunities, not based on their credentials, but based on what they know, is a really critical element to us moving forward. Frankly, there's just not enough people that are going to come out of 4-year degrees in order to fill the skills gap. So we have to, if we're going to be successful as a community, we have to start looking at and building up alternative pipelines and alternative education routes.
Yeah, if I could
Thank you.
just, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
if I could just tag on to that too, because that's a great point. So one of the things that you can do, our community is an ACT WorkKeys community, right? So which means we really strive to get students and job seekers through a WorkKeys program, so they can do those assessments and come out with skills, communication, conflict resolution, those soft skills that we talked about earlier. But we also have certified job profilers that can go into a workplace, take a look at the job descriptions that you currently have, bring in incumbent workers, talk to them, score the skills that are actually needed, put them into on a priority list of the skills that are actually necessary to do the job, and then reevaluate how those job postings are going out. So we can take a look at what reality is versus what you would really like it to be, and figure out where the alignments are, so we can get more people into good paying jobs and jobs that pay a livable wage, and not have to worry about what they need to walk through the door. And then we can start looking at state and federal dollars to help pay to upskill those individuals. And so I think we have it backwards. A lot of times we put in a job description what we really want to see, but don't realize that the reality is the people that we really need to hire aren't meeting those qualifications.
Thank you, Bill. And I know we're going to share your information because I know we use a lot of workforce lingo. And if you don't understand it, you can circle back with Bill, because it is sometimes a different world if you live in that space. So, but Danette, one of the questions in the chat was, you talked about creating an awareness, right? Taking control of the narrative, that you maintain a talent board that you could potentially hire from. And the question in the chat was, nonprofits are also employers. So you named 3 things that they could do in order to look at their own organization as a nonprofit. But is there anything else that you would add that when they look at workforce gaps, is there anything else that you would like to add on what they could do as a nonprofit?
Sure, Irene, thanks for the question. For those of you who attended the Moonridge Group's Philanthropy Leaders Summit last week, I was very inspired by Poonam, who I am always inspired by. And I always take her challenges to heart, right? It's a chance to kind of self-evaluate. And so the 3 things that I wrote down that I'm doing personally, so as an employer, right, these are what I'm doing, and I'm challenging the nonprofit leaders to do the same thing, right? Be informed, right? Where are those gaps? How can you help close them? Where do you play into the solution? That's, again, taking control of the narrative. The second thing, back to the eyes, right? So be informed, be intentional. Make sure that when you're creating those job descriptions, like, we've talked about with the other panelists, that you're being very thoughtful and intentional about what skills you need, not just starting with the 4-year degree or something like that. What type of transferable skills may somebody have, and look more broadly at those resumes. And then the third thing is be inquisitive. Be inquisitive of your existing talent pool. Ask them, where do they want to be? What do they want to accomplish? How can you help them reach those goals and maybe fill some of those gaps just by providing additional learning? And, it's kind of a one person at a time and treating everybody as individuals. But if we think about people as individuals instead of segments, I think that those gaps can be closed more quickly than we may otherwise believe if all we do is look at the statistics, because the statistics are depressing. So I choose to think about the optimistic point of view on these things, and individually, where can we have impact? I don't know if that answers the question, Irene.
Yes.
I'm happy to have anybody reach out to me directly.
You added some great stuff into the 3 things that you had already said. So thank you. Bill, one of the questions in the chat has to do with young adults, like and students within the K through 12 pipeline. But before I go to that, Kate had a question about the 7 emerging industries within Southern Nevada. And she noticed that education was not listed. And that's probably a question that you could take offline with her because there is a methodology that they used. So I want to acknowledge her and her question. But my question to you is, yesterday when transportation and logistics employers were convened, what do you remember about getting young people, young professionals involved in these emerging industries? Because also at the table was clean energy, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And so clean energy may be, it's emerging. So how would you get young adults interested in those career paths?
Yeah, it's clean technologies. So anything that has to do with, solar or clean things, green things. So a couple of things came out as far as the youth, right? So young adults in the workforce world, we consider 16 to 24 or 18 to 24, those age groups as young adults or youth. And some of the challenges that they have is the requirements for the position itself to hire youth, even though they may have, for instance, in trucking, they may acquire their CDL, right, their commercial driver's license at 18. But in order to work in a trucking company that goes across state lines, they have to be 21. Or to go to work, in some of the bus companies or transport companies where, insurance is an issue, they have to be over 21. So that's an issue. The other issue that we found was the messaging to those young adults or to the youth from industry. So the message isn't strong enough. For instance, in general and advanced manufacturing, one of the manufacturers said, well, manufacturing isn't sexy. I'm like, well, change the message, right? Change the message to where this isn't your dad's or your grandfather's factory anymore, where you're coming home smelling like grease. Now they're working on computers. They have computerized CNC machines. They need software designers and software developers. They need people who can go in and work on the computer systems. And you walk into any of the manufacturers here in the Valley, and you're amazed at how clean and how advanced the technology is for any of those machines. So we have to start changing the message to the youth to get them more involved. And that goes, across all of the industries for which we're looking and creating these pathways for.
Thank you, Bill. And I know that Kimberly from the Girl Scouts should be one that I would encourage that connection, because her organization is working on leadership and life skills that would add, I think, to the conversation with the employers from that group. So just hopefully we will share Bill's information soon towards the end. And then I know we're getting close to our closing time. I do want to, Patrick, I'll go to you first, and then Danette, and then Bill. But for you, Patrick, any closing remarks? I know we can't solve the world's problems in 60 minutes, but any last words that you would like to share with the group?
Thank you, Irene. I don't think anything particularly full of wisdom. What I would say is maybe full of optimism, right? Like, I think this convening here today is a great example of where we're going, right, as a community, because we're talking about the issues. And Bill said earlier, you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think measuring it is taking the temperature of the nonprofit organizations, which is a strong sector here in our community, of taking the temperature of our industry, manufacturing, hospitality, technology, engineering, on and on, because that's where it starts, is really understanding what the needs of the community are, and then rallying around that need in a collaborative way to address those issues. So, the fact that we have an LVGEA, the fact that we have an active United Way, the fact that we have workforce connections, right? Like, these are the ingredients that are going to make us as a community successful. And then we probably collectively need to say, well, where are those gaps? And then work together to fill those gaps in a collaborative way. And that's where, folks like Danette and Magda come in, right? Because they help that with those convenings, they help be part of the funding community. They're helping to solve and provide some of the resources that we need to make sure there's more women in the workforce, to make sure that they have the same equity, to make sure they have the same opportunities. Same goes for minorities, right? We need to create pathways for Blacks, for Hispanics, and for women in critical employment opportunities like technology, like engineering, like clean technology. I mean, I could go on because all of those things are going to make our community stronger. And that's really what this is all about. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Patrick. Danette, how about with you? Closing remarks?
Yeah, I really like everything that Patrick said. We've hopefully shared a lot of information that has spiked interest. So my closing remark would be just a suggestion, a challenge or opportunity. Pick one thing that resonated with you, learn more about it, figure out where you can have some contribution in that way. And even if it is just expanding your realm of understanding, pick one thing and just do it. That's my closing comment.
Thank you, Danette. And that was my takeaway from the Philanthropy Summit. And I picked the one thing and I'm on it. So thank you for making it practical. And Bill, I think Janet reminded me, I don't know if you said your work title at LVGEA, but can you say that? And then can you give us some closing remarks?
Sure. I'm the Director of Workforce Development at LVGEA. And I guess my closing remark is, especially in the nonprofit world, we get, and also in the workforce development world, we get hung up on a lot of the vernacular and our acronyms and things like that. And one of the things that struck me just recently is we talk about programs. We have this program, we have that program. And from an employer standpoint, employers don't want another program. So what I've started to do is start talking about opportunities, just like Danette said. So instead of using programs, let's start using opportunities. This is an opportunity for you to take advantage of what we have going on in this area or that area. And so start using that and then concentrate on more collaboration outside of your normal network. As a adjunct professor, I have sales and marketing and I have business classes, and I talk to them about networking. And I say, don't be the guy that goes to a networking event and start handing out cards, right? Because nobody wants to talk to you. Figure out ways that you can put Mr. A with Miss B, share an affinity, you walk out and it'll come back to you eventually because you're making those collisions happen. So make the collisions happen.
Amen. Well said, Bill. All right, Miss Jasmine, can we put up the last slide that gives people's, our panelists, their contact information? I think that might be the last slide that we have. And while she's doing that, I just want to thank the leadership of United Way. I know that Danette is on the board. Thank you, Dana, Janet, Jasmine, Megan, for your remarkable leadership. The fact that United Way is being intentional to be part of the solution by bringing up the conversation is worthy of an applause. And the fact that you guys have continued the nonprofit sector Zoom meetings to bring awareness to a variety of topics, even though the pandemic has moved on in a sort of way, even though, so thank you, because that's leadership and that's what Danette was talking about. Pick one thing to be intentional. And then Ms. Jasmine, do we have the contact information? I think it's coming. With that, I also want to say tonight the Aces play their third game.
We'll have it up in 30 seconds. We're
Okay,
experiencing
don't worry.
technical difficulties.
I just want to give my words of encouragement to the Aces tonight. That would be a phenomenal win for our region. if you believe it or not, we're such a small region in comparison to other, but we're very mighty. And now that we have sports as one of the emerging industries, just welcome you to watch the game if you can, and encourage the history that will be made. And so this is our closing slide. This will be sent out to the whole group. But if you want a deeper discussion with Danette about the project 257, if you want to ask Bill about those emerging industries, if you're specifically interested in technology, Patrick would be your go-to person. So with that, we will close out at 2:59. Just want to say thank you again, United Way, for your leadership. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you all for attending.